Hello and welcome to the Michael Harding podcast. Today is the 23rd of June and it's the feast. In the old Christian calendar, it's the feast of St. John the Forerunner, or as they call him in the West, St. John the Baptist. I don't know why I like this feast day. I think it's because it's midsummer. To me, it's the equivalent of Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. Midsummer is 21st, 2 days ago, and there's a whole lot of midsummer festivals, and they're very much just about midsummer, just about that sense of the magic that happens on that shortest night, longest day. And the midsummer is this kind of joyous explosion, right? It is what it is. It's like feeling you're worshipping the sun, you're worshipping the sense of glory and light and magnificence of being. Sunset at about 10:20, and if you're in the hills above Loch Allen, you'd be watching it, as they say, crossing the north. It goes right around. It's a white light on the horizon the whole time as it travels from west back over to east. So there's no darkness at all. There's no night at all. If you're in an urban area or in a city, you definitely find that it gets dark. But if you're outside in somewhere like Leitrim or in anywhere in Ireland, you know that it never gets dark. That sun just goes right around, right across the north. And that's mystical and that's beautiful, and that is something you hugely celebrate. So what about the feast of St. John the Baptist or St. John the Forerunner? Was that to kind of wipe out that festival? I don't think so, because people aren't stupid. I mean, the sun is in the sky. It's the longest day. It'll always be the longest day. Midsummer will always be midsummer. And it's the beautiful moment of, it's like being alive. Now, what I think that I get out of the feast of St. John the Baptist is something different. It's a sense that once you peak at the solstice, you've flipped over into the next journey. I've always felt that. I felt on midwinter, you're going down into the dark, like you're going down into a tunnel. But once you touch the solstice of midwinter, you've turned around, you're walking back up, you're coming out of the tunnel. And once you hit the solstice of midsummer, again you're turning around and you're going back down. So I said to somebody yesterday, it's all downhill from here to Christmas. But it is. And I think that's why I like the Feast of John the Baptist at this point, 2 days after midsummer. Because he's such a promise. I mean, this is another question, like, you mightn't want to get into this. People are not necessarily Christian anymore, and so just leave aside the whole Christian story. I'm only taking a look at where it happens time-wise. And time-wise, my emotions in midsummer are the sense that I have reached the summit. I have reached the pinnacle. I have reached the top of the mountain. I have reached my prime for the year. This is as good as it gets. And then 2 days later, I'm sitting here and thinking, this is a beautiful day, because you're facing into the slide downwards again, and you're doing it with a sense of hope. Now, it's not every day of the week that I get hope from Christianity. And it's not every day I get hope from Buddhism. I don't. I mean, most of the time, it's become normal to live with a sense of quiet despair. I live not in the glory of awakened light. I live in a kind of a darkness. I'm searching around, and the only question that I try and figure out is, who am I? You know, what is this thing that I'm in called life? And to be honest with you, I don't get an answer to it. I try Christianity, I try Buddhism, and they're good for a while. They get me through the day. And the funny thing is, that's the way I think it's good like that, you know. It doesn't get any better than that. When you're trying to meditate, they say you're not meditating. When you try to meditate, you're not meditating. So when you have a good experience of calm, serenity, peace, when you have a good experience in your faith, whether it be Hindu or Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or whatever, when you have a good experience, you feel, I've got it, I've grasped it, I'm home and dry, I've reached some plateau of happiness. But you know, you haven't. It's a touch. It's a touch of beauty. It's a little light in the shadow, and the rest of the time, you're kind of in shadow. And personally, I feel I reached a great sense of equanimity with myself when I kind of accepted the shadows. I accepted, like, you can't be reaching for too much. When you meet people who have left religion behind, and they ask you, do you believe in afterlife? And you say, no. And then they say, well, sure, what's the point of it? You can see that they had a high expectation of religion. And then they left it, abandoned it as a practice, because they were disillusioned. You know, if I'm not going to feel a buzz of enlightenment all the time, what's the point in practicing Buddhism? If I'm not going to feel some certitude about, you know, an eternity of heaven that will begin automatically at the end of this life, if you can't assure me of it, like give me a guarantee like an insurance company might, then, you know, why would I be bothered? If my life still stays ordinary, why would I be bothered with religion? And of course, what I've found out for myself is that, well, in fact, it's about being ordinary. It's about the shadows. It's about life not being perfect and having low expectations. This is the life we live. This is the real life we live. And it's beautiful if you use religion to let it breathe. Not that you're expecting religion to send you high sky with you know, big buzz, positive feelings, you know, charging you like with adrenaline or something. It's not going to do that. But I suppose it's like a context. I heard somebody saying recently, two philosophers talking to each other, and one of them said to the other, you know, you just can't escape the religious frame. You know, examining the meaning of life, you can't really escape some context that is about the religious frame. And if that be the case, then it's interesting to say, well, my life is, and I'm saying this about myself, my life is very, very mediocre. It's very mediocre. It's very ordinary. I do terribly ordinary, boring things from day to day. I had 3 sausages for lunch. I mean, that was an excitement. I decided I'll just go wild and have 3 sausages for lunch. I mean, they were in the fridge and I was afraid of leaving them till tomorrow in case they go bad, so You wouldn't call that excitement, would you? Would you? You wouldn't call that like living in the fast lane. I'll have 3 sausages for lunch. They're in the fridge. They might go bad. What I didn't think of doing was actually frying them up, but then leaving them aside and having them cold. Now that would have been a much more clever idea, and I didn't think of that. Was, in fact, the lady wife, the beloved. She thought of that, and she said it to me. Now the thing is that she's in Leitrim and I'm in Donegal, because I come up here to write. When I want to be really alone, I come up to Donegal, and I'm here at the moment in solitude writing my book. New book for 2022, and there's a new one coming out in the autumn as well. But anyway, she's down there, I'm up here, and we talk on the FaceTime, the Apple version of Skype, and it's great fun. We can natter to each other as if we're both in the room. The only difference is she can't reach out her hand through the screen and get the sausages and do what should be done. So after me frying them, and there is me eating them, and she's on the screen, and she said, "You're having 3 sausages?" And I said, "Yeah, I didn't want to leave them till tomorrow." And she said, "Well, I suppose you could have just cooked them and left them and let them cold tomorrow." And I thought, holy God, I never thought of that. Like, how stupid can you be? How stupid am I? How mediocre is my life? How ordinary is my life? It's fierce ordinary. And I do, I don't really try to meditate. I do what I call prayer. I mean, we all have different ways of doing it and different things we do. But, again, the bottom line is, I try it and it works for a kind of a split second every so often. But it does open to me a way of living in the world which actually makes the shadows beautiful. It makes the ordinary beautiful. It makes the sausages taste better. My religion makes the sausages taste better. There actually is a Buddhist prayer. You're encouraged in Tibet to say before you have any food. If you had a Tibetan Lama in the house, a monk, you'd notice that every time before you'd give him food, he'd bow the head and he'd be muttering to himself. And you'd be wondering, what's he muttering? Grace before meals. Blessed, O Lord, and these thy gifts. Well, no, he's hardly saying Christian blessing. So what's he saying? Well, in fact, the Buddhist prayer before eating food is to give thanks for all the people in the process of making the food. Those who grew the seeds, those who baked the bread, those who delivered it to the table. And then the second half of the prayer is usually saying, may I eat this and may it benefit me in order that I might bring other people to enlightenment. So I take the food because it will help me to benefit other people. That's the dynamic of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva prayer is always, it's a really noble idea in Buddhism. Buddhism is reincarnation, and eventually you get to the Pure Land or you become enlightened. So you don't want to be coming back in lower births. You want to be coming back in higher births. The Bodhisattva makes a wish to come back in order to help everybody else get there. Now that's a kind of a poetry of Tibetan Buddhism, an idea. And the idea, if you want to reject it at a literal level, you'd be very right to do so. It only works if it works. If that works for you as an idea, as a poetry, then you take it on board. You imbibe it, and you say, oh, now I know that's a kind of a framework for eating sausages. It's because I'm going to be reborn and help you come to enlightenment. I'm going to spend another lifetime. I'm going to dedicate myself to spend another lifetime bringing you and everybody else and all sentient beings to enlightenment. This is why I eat my sausages. And that's a Buddhist way of doing it. You can take the Buddhist way, you can take a Christian way, or Islam. Rumi has some lovely prayers about eating food and the joy. You know, Rumi goes very much into the idea in the gospel about the bridegroom. They're all sitting down and they're eating and drinking, and somebody in the room says, why are you eating and drinking so much? You know, we could give that to the poor. And Jesus says, you know, don't be chastising the wedding guests for celebrating while the bridegroom is with them. The bridegroom won't always be with them. And I like that too. There's a poetry in that about, you know, your own self, that there's moments of joy, there's moments that flash joyfully in your heart. And it is good to celebrate in those moments. But it won't always be like that, and it isn't always like that, because our lives are mediocre. Our lives are full of sausages and cups of tea and ill health and anxiety about families and loneliness and missing people, and grieving. Our lives are full of those things. The bridegroom is not always with us. And you see, that's the way the texts about Jesus work as poems, you know. The bridegroom becomes a metaphor for that flash of joy inside yourself. Is the bridegroom with me today? Answer, no. He's not in the heart today. The joyful, full energy that I'm in the full, complete presence of something beautiful and mystical and amazing. No. That's not what's going on here today. What's going on here today is rain outside, the sound of the raindrops on the wind, and the wind pelting around the house. Me inside trying to write a book, not having much success, blank pages looking back at me, and me looking in the mirror. Isolated. And that's when the murmuring starts. Now, the murmuring is a really interesting word. The murmuring is a word they use, if you go back again, 3rd, 4th, 5th century, into the desert, to the mothers and the fathers of the desert, these mystical astronauts that went into their own psyche in solitude and explored it. They talk about murmuring as being a bother, a botheration. And the murmuring is a word they used for the voices in your head which are negative and which bring you down. And again, we all have them. I've spoken about them and written about them very often, about the kind of negative emotions you have, especially with people who suffer from depression. I went through serious bouts of it at different times. Negative emotions all over. Non-stop negative voices. You'd be looking in the mirror in the morning and there's a voice in your head telling you everything is wrong with your life, everything is wrong with your health, everything is wrong with everything. And sometimes I always remember, like my mother, there was sometimes my mother would be so joyful, and there'd be other times you'd go over to her. I'm talking when she was old now, nearly 90 years of age, but there was sometimes you'd go over to her, and God Almighty, the poison she'd be pouring out of her, giving off about this one and that one, and it'd wear you out. And we'd be driving away, me and the beloved, and we'd just drive away in silence because there'd be nothing you could say after a moment like that with your mother, you know. And in the silence then maybe the beloved, my lady wife, she'd say to me, "She's not well. There's something wrong." She'd mean it physically. And I'd guarantee you within 2 or 3 days, she'd be with the doctor because she had a kidney infection or something. And she didn't know she had the kidney infection, but it was coming out in a sense of negativity. It was allowing the murmuring, the negativity inside her to murmur away and possess her. And then she couldn't stop herself when she'd meet us. She couldn't stop herself giving off about people. And I do the same. There's times I open up in a negative way, usually about politics, and I'd be ranting away negatively about this, that, or the other in politics. And I'd realise, I'm not well. I'm not well. These negative things I'm saying are emotions that are coming from inside. They're coming from some sort of murmuring, and it can be physical, mental, it can be all sorts of reasons that bring you to that condition. But when you get there, you can get really disillusioned then about religion and think, well, if religion doesn't give me a big charge like a drug, if it doesn't lift me up, then it's no good. If it doesn't guarantee me perfection and happiness and eternity of bliss, then it's no good. Well, sorry, but that's not what religion is supposed to be doing. Religion is just a frame, a context within which you can experience the sad times, the lonely times, the negative times. You can experience them better. In a sense, you can experience them, you can experience the reality around you as the reality around you and not get possessed by negative voices. I suppose that's the real thing for me that religion does. It protects me against negative emotions or disturbing emotions that come up inside me and want to take me over. So one of the days I love is this John the Baptist Day. And I love it because it's the first big feast after we've turned the corner of Midsummer. Midsummer is ecstasy. And I love celebrating it as ecstasy. And I suppose I did celebrate it as ecstasy more often as a young person than now as I'm getting older. And maybe it is a young person's festival, and maybe that's why when you look back on stories about Midsummer in folklore and all the rest of it, it's usually the time that young people came together and had their ecstasy, their kind of sense of the wonder and amazing thing it was to be alive on this particular moment. And then, of course, maybe that's the moment where young people cross the portal into the world of the spirits, the world of the imagination, the world of love. And so there's all those stories about the portal opening, Midsummer being that, time where love is loose. Love is loose and has no surveillance, and there's no controlling love. Love is wild and free and just ecstatic, orgasmic. I think that's very much the feeling I used to get from Midsummer. And I used to really, so love those times, bonfires and all the rest of it. And there's a bonfire. We used to always have the bonfire, we'd call it the bonfire. The bonfire. And we'd have it on St. John's Eve. Midsummer, very often they say is the 21st, but the shortest night is the night between the 21st and the 22nd. And the 21st and the 22nd are equal days. They're absolutely precisely equal. And I would think that 21st or 22nd both could be said to be midsummer. So if the 22nd is midsummer, it's also the eve of St. John's feast, and that was the bonfire night. And then today you wake up and it's like the party's over. Every day in April, and especially then in May and June, every single day, I'd wake up with more excitement because the light would come earlier into the bedroom, and the sense of new flowers, the flowers and the daffodils in the end of March, and the apple blossom, and then the white thorn in May, the May bush. Like everything is growing towards the flowering. And that midsummer moment is like human flowering, the soul flowering. And the moment it's over, and I love this experience, the moment it's over you have this feeling, as Basho says, after the ecstasy, wash the dishes. We've peaked. We're looking back down the other side of the hill. And what happens then? It connects me with the ordinariness of my life, the mediocrity, the simplicity, and the 3 sausages. But it allows me, if I use a religious frame in this sense, to experience these things as beautiful, as mystical. It's almost like the ecstasy has gone inside. It's almost like the completion of joy in the midsummer moment is carried. It's carried like in a flame, like in a candle, like in a bonfire. The light is carried into the darkness, into the shadow. It is carried down there, into the heart that sorrows, that grieves, that is damaged because it's alone. That's what religion does, whether it's Islam, Buddhist, Christian, Jew, whatever. It's a frame for experiencing the slide downwards. That even in this slide downwards, even in this mediocre life, even in this ordinariness, there's still something completely ecstatic and beautiful about being here. This transforms, for me, it transforms everything. In other words, the thing that was negative becomes actually more positive. The ordinariness of living a banal life where I'm not really hitting the button perfectly as a writer. I have blank pages and I can't finish them, and it's just boring and long and disciplined to keep at it. And then I'm having lunch and I'm having 3 sausages because I don't want to leave them to tomorrow. And, and it's raining outside and you think, God, this is a flat day. This is like so far away from ecstasy. How can I bear it? Any minute now I'll hear the murmuring. I'll hear the negative voices in my head saying, you're wasting your time as a writer. You're getting too old to be a writer. Your health is not good. It'll probably get worse. And that's where I am. And in that moment, if I'm living in the frame of religion, in the context of religious faith, it's like carrying the light of midsummer, the ecstasy of midsummer. It's like carrying it deep down into that ordinary space. And then it transforms the ordinary. It's like candles or lanterns under the skin. It's like a glow behind the image that lights up the image. Backlit. My whole reality of sausages becomes backlit by divinity, by the sacred. And I used the poetry of whatever religion, bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts. And I see these sausages as given to me, gifted to me. The whole cosmos gathering itself together, but in this accidental moment, which is intrinsic to every other moment, every other physical event in the universe. Therefore, I am grateful to be awake in this moment, aware in this moment, seeing this little bit of food and being grateful. Or maybe I'm doing it in a Buddhist way and thinking, I'll take this and open my heart to the road ahead, to live forever and to bring all humanity, all sentient beings to enlightenment. To live in the frame of religion, to live with a religious context around the ordinary. It's not transforming you from the ordinary. Religion won't take you out of the ordinary. It won't take you out of even grief or sorrow or depression. But it's a mechanism like a psychotherapy that is second to none. It allows you to live through those moments, to really live through them, living with ecstasy, living with joy. And you're living through them because the light of your faith, be it Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, the light of your faith, you've internalized. It's in your heart. It's like a poem, but it's in your heart. As you live, as you eat, as you look out on the mediocrity of the day and the grey sky and the rain, you live. Remember, this guy John the Baptist, Saint John the Baptist, is not Christian. He's Jewish. He's coming out of the tradition of Jewish mysticism and Jewish hermetic, solitary life in the deserts. This tradition that was continued by Christians, was continued by Muslims. In the Sinai desert, in the peninsula there. It was always there. It's a singular thing that is in all three different strands of Abraham's religions. Astronauts of the psyche, searching in the solitude of their own mind, asking one question: who am I? Who are you? Finding in the solitude the thou-ness, the you-ness of God, the otherness, the personalized otherness. Who are you? There they were, 2,000 years ago, asking those questions, finding in their minds the answers, listening for the voice that speaks in silence, not the voice of the murmuring, not the voice of the negativity that's in us all the time, that's almost unstoppable from the moment we wake and look in the mirror, but the other voice that comes when those voices are silenced. The voice that is silent. Who am I? Where do I belong? That was John the Baptist. Wild man. And look at the story of his life too, and how fantastically wonderful the story of his life is. From the times in the desert. No, actually go back. We even know his mother was Elizabeth, and supposedly a cousin of Mary, who was the mother of Jesus. And then when the two women come close, John the Baptist gives an old kick in the womb. Well, I love that. And then we know that his father was Zechariah, I think. Am I right? And he was a priest in the temple. He was the one who looked after the incense or something. And they were fighting about a name for the child because they were an elderly couple. All the interesting people in the Bible, they're all elderly couples. I used to remind myself of that in my 40s when I was the father of an infant. But anyway, the elderly couple, and you can imagine how excited they get about the name, and they're arguing about it and this name and that name. And one day your man is organising the owl incense and the smoke is going up in front of the big arches of the temple as he's doing his priestly duties. And it says he sees an angel. Angel, I think the word would be a messenger, some messenger of God came to him, was present to him. Said his name will be John. It's funny, isn't it? It wasn't a big deal, the name. If you wanted to humanize the story, I can imagine it happening without any sort of sense of God, just in a secular story. He's arguing with the lady wife about the name of the child. She's pregnant and what, and he's just demented. And how do you solve it? And then he's on his own. He's, working away at the priestly duties, and he thinks, I've got it. His name's John. That's it. Go back and tell her. And you say he laid down the law. His name. So there's no more arguments. We've agreed on his name. I like to think that for my purposes, for the way that I want to enrich myself with the poetic narrative, I take his encounter with the angel as beautiful, that his name comes from God. Who am I? Who am I is this lovely question, profound question. And then the specialness of a name is the first way that you say who you are. And the whole idea that your name comes from God, is given to you by God. It's like a mantra in Asian culture, in Buddhist or Hindu tradition. A teacher might give you a mantra. When I first took refuge in the Panchayanitrul Rinpoche, I took refuge in him. I did a religious little service of devotion to him, with him, that expressed the fact that I would become his student. And part of that process was he then gave me a name, gave me a new name. It signifies some sort of transformation, that I think is really necessary, was necessary for me at that moment in my life. I was 40 years of age. I wanted transformation. I needed transformation, and religion gave me a way that contextualized the journey of transforming. And he gave me a name, and the name is as close to me as the skin on my fingers to this day. I don't use it in public. I don't tell anybody I have another name. It was simply a singular private moment between me and the teacher that laid claim on me. That I will remake you. The use of name in religion is so powerful, so beneficial. I know, for example, I remember there was one time when I was about 19 or 18, I used to go away and pray with a crowd of Jesus people. They were young, beautiful people who were innocent and gathered in their brokenness around the idea of being born again in Jesus. And I looked in the door and stayed with them a little while for a few weekends and that kind of thing. But they all had biblical names, beautiful names I hadn't even heard of, like from Old Testament texts. Aphia, Jerusha, Zibion, lovely names. So they had become, they had become new people. They had been transformed in this. So the name is a very powerful thing, and I like this whole thing of John the forerunner. He went ahead of Jesus, the forerunner, John the Baptist. So his name came from the angel to his father. So there's like a sense that God named him. And if you're doing a critical analysis of the text, then you'd be able to say this is the pattern. This is, the pattern of these stories. They're secular, but they have a structure that implies a meaning. So God named him. That's what it's doing. So you can study the text and understand the text without being religious, without believing anything. There's an anthropology of religion, a sociology of religion. There's critical analysis of the texts in the holy books that all can be done from a scholarly point of view and will throw up good results and interesting results and enriching results. But it's not about believing in it, but it's not about not believing. I suppose that's the point I'd come to. The fact that it's just a text doesn't mean I don't take it into my heart as a poem. And when I think of the name of John the Baptist given by God, I think of the fact that we know his father and mother, that they were elderly, that he leapt in the womb when Jesus came close to him, that he recognized Jesus years later after he had been in the desert for so long, eating locusts and ants and all sorts of foul insects. And then Jesus comes and he says he is the one. So it's like a kind of a big power of authority because of who John is, pointing to Jesus. And then, of course, you have the moment in some places, that image where it's like, and a voice from heaven came, he is the one. And you're just so close here to Monty Python. You're just so close to jokes, visual jokes, and jokes about God, oh, he's the one. But there's no need to stick just with the Monty Python version of these stories. Now, I really need to go on a little bit longer just to finish. And I'm saying that for me, when I contextualize my life with faith, it allows me to experience it as transformative. The mundane is transformed into ecstasy. The 3 sausages become a mystical meal, a moment in time where my being is aware of what's happening, and I'm feeling a sense of gratefulness. What happens in COVID, what has been happening for a year and a half, is that isolation has allowed people to suffer too much murmuring, too much negativity. And being away from jobs, being away from loved ones, being away from all the ordinary connections, because in those ordinary connections you become who you are. They define who you are. Who am I is answered when I go out to the gala shop to buy a few messages and somebody says, "You're looking well today." And I think, am I? You're telling me who I am today. Thank you. Thank you. Or somebody says, "You're looking a bit tired." And you say, "Thank you, yeah. Maybe, something? Maybe I am a bit tired." But they also tell you who you are in deep ways. You want to be a friend to your children and somebody tells you need to be a parent. I'm a parent now. because you become a parent, because you're forced into becoming a parent. You've negotiated with the community around you who you are, and they tell you, well, we want you to be a parent here, and we want you to be a lover there, and we want you to be, you know, we want you to be a person who doesn't talk too much at the table, please. Okay, I'll shut up, I'll say no more. That kind of, I'm only joking, but yeah, being who you are is also being with other people. And it's like you do it with other people and they define who you are. And then you go from there inside yourself, and inside yourself, deeply you listen to a silence and something speaks, and that's like somebody whispering your name. And that's so beautiful. That's mystical. That's living on the inside. Just think of your name and think of it spoken. After the resurrection, she's going around, she meets the gardener, she doesn't know where's the body, where's my Jesus, where's my beloved? And the gardener says to her, Mary. He spoke her name. And she recognizes him. Now that's a really, really interesting moment. You know, because it's not about a ghost, it's not about a spirit floating around who disguised himself with a false beard to pretend he was the gardener. No. It's the dynamic that she's living through, encountering, and in whatever is happening, she's experiencing the risen Christ. There's something about a name, something about the way he says Mary, something that in her name she is known by God, known at the deepest level of being known. Who am I? I am Mary. This man recognizes me as Mary. Now I know what the risen Christ is. The risen Christ is all and everything and everyone that recognizes me as who I am. This is a story that could as easily be Buddhist as Christian, because it's in the naming of the unnameable depth in your own soul, naming you completely, naming you. And every moment becomes heaven. And every other human being is the one who is to come. Every other human being is the Christ. We never are going to grow wings and fly off, but inside, in the heart, we have wings, and we fly every day. I look at the ordinary world, and everything is transformed, and everything remains the same. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.